Hi, and welcome to RecoverED, a podcast from the Magdalen House, a recovery community for alcoholism. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we share an episode from one of our 3 podcast series. The RecoverED podcast is made to educate the community on alcoholism, the Magdalen House, our programs, and resources we offer to the community. In each episode, you will get to know the disease of alcoholism a little better, and soon you'll know how you can shatter the stigma around alcoholism in your community. With your host, me, Laura Wilson, recovered alcoholic and communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House. We are so glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of RecoverED. My name is Laura Wilson, and I am the communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House and also host of this podcast. Today, I am so happy to have Mayan Corioso in the chair with me. He has been in recovery for a very long time, has recently become a board member in the last year, and is active in our men's community. So Mayan, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you are here today. So Mayan, qualify yourself as an alcoholic first and foremost. Tell me about yourself.
Easy to do. I started drinking in college and quickly found out that I was different in regards to how I drank. Played college baseball and had aspirations to play professional baseball. But alcoholism progressed pretty quickly in me. In about 4 years, I was about as hopeless as can be. DWIs, that doesn't necessarily make me an alcoholic, but the reality was I tried everything to stop drinking. My mom took me to therapy. I went to a psychiatrist, went to treatment, and I couldn't stay sober. And finally, I was introduced to 12-step meetings in a treatment center, and I heard for the first time what was really wrong with me. And what was wrong with me was that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. I could not just call my numbers. I couldn't just say I was going to have a couple like all my friends did. It would always lead to just chaos and me exceeding the amount that I intended to do, which caused consequences in my life that were really painful and harmed others and harmed myself. And then the reality was I tried to stop. I tried to just swear this off. I think I did like the vegan diet for a while. I tried all these crazy things, exercise and all that stuff, and nothing worked. In fact, it actually got worse for a while. But I learned the mental obsession that I had. That's what I was up against. Was that once I stopped drinking, there was a timer for me, and a week or a month, and I would be back to doing what I swore I would never do. My mom would be crying, asking me to stop. Therapists, judges, parole officers, all that stuff. They told me if I ever drank again, I would go to prison because I was facing some pretty serious legal trouble, and that wasn't enough for me. And so finally in 2008, I had hit what I call my step one truth. We call it the bottom, but really it was an emotional realization. It was an interior realization that this was me and that I needed to do something different. And so 12-step recovery is where I found my solution, and I dove in head first. I was 25 years old when I got sober, and I had to match the intensity and craziness that my drinking was with my recovery, and so I did that. Got into the steps, I worked the steps, and I had an awakening and have been sober ever since. It has not been all great ever since, but I've been sober ever since, so that's my story.
Awesome. But now you have the spiritual toolkit to pick up when life is lifing.
Right.
Yeah. So you work the steps. So it sounds like, and what's a common theme in these podcasts is having that true step one experience, really getting to that desperation. And that's when, we become willing to believe that there's something that can cure our alcoholism. And then we make the decision to go through these rest of the steps. Today, we are talking about step 10. So can you tell me a little bit about the steps in between to help you get to that spiritual solution and what that looked like?
So step one is, for me, it was a step that I had to work on my own. I mean, it wasn't, someone couldn't explain it to me. I had to line up my experience. So I had to go get done. That's the reality. And it was a painful process of me coming to that realization. But step two is this realization that I just don't have the power, and I'm insane when it comes to alcohol, and I need to be returned to sanity, and that there is a power out there that can get me sober and happy about it. Because I've been sober before, but not really happy. It's been a miserable experience. But step three for me was just a decision to do like what you just described. It's the rest of the work, and so steps 4 through 9 for me was the vehicle, and it opened my eyes to how I've been living my life up to that point, and really getting some inventory. Step 4 really lays out some resentments, fears, and my sexual behaviors that have caused myself and many others a lot of harm. And that has nothing to do with drinking. That's like my way of living. I call it the operating system that's really dysfunctional, and I need a new operating system. And so I recognize this stuff in step 4 and 5, lining this out with a sponsor. And I realize that there are defects of character that I've been driving. Page 62 says that we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion. So if I'm driven by anything, that means I'm not driving. And so I'm being driven by these defects of character, this fear, these resentments. And I needed to get clear of that. And so 6 and 7 was just the willingness to allow my higher power to take that from me through this process of exposure. And then 8 and 9 really for me was the turning point in my recovery, when I went out and just cleaned house. I made amends to people that I'd harmed. And for the first time in my life, I took off the mask. I lived a double life, and I can do that in recovery too, but I lived a double life, and I took off the mask and went to these people and made amends, and then continue to do that as time goes on.
When do we start practicing step 10? Do I have to wait for all of my amends to be done?
It's a great question. So there's a lot of confusion, and I think there's a struggle, because for me, I took my sponsor, it wasn't my fault, but my sponsor kind of drug out the process for a while the first time I did the steps. And so it was like month 10 before and so you don't even remember your inventory. You don't even remember the process. You're just like reading some stuff. But the way it's supposed to be done is that I need to get to this point as quickly as possible. And it tells us that, we're going to start the process of making amends. We're going to kind of clean up the past as we go along. But as soon as I make 1 or 2 amends, I'm on step 10, 11, and 12. And that's how we do it today. And that's how my current sponsor does it. So
how does one do step 10? What does the book tell us about step 10?
Well, we need to clear this up, because there's a lot of confusion about step 10. A lot of people think that step 10 is done at night. And people just don't understand. But there's some precise instructions in page 84. I'll kind of go through this. And I just want to share this, because for me, I did not understand or do this step. And it really caused me a lot of discomfort. Like all those bedevilments on page 52 can come true in recovery, even though you're sober. And so there's some key words that I want to cover here in regards to step 10. But it says we've entered the world of the spirit, which means that I've had this awakening. I'm recovered. That's the term that we're all chasing. We need to get here quickly. And then it tells me our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. So I got some key insight as I worked steps 4 through 9. This is why it should be done quickly, because if I did a really thorough job in 4 through 9, this is pretty simple. It's what I just did, except on a daily basis. It says this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. Okay. So here's the mechanics. It says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. So these are the kind of defects of character that, like I said before, was driving me. And this is the behavior that I need to look for. This is what I looked for in steps 4, and then what I was able to get out with a sponsor in step 5. So when these crop up, here we go. We ask God at once to remove them. So that means that I need to pause. This is not done at night. It says at once. So as soon as something pops up throughout my day, I get quiet for a second. I get right with God. I get over in the corner and throw up a prayer. God, there's some resentment that's going on right now. I don't want to live this way anymore. Help me see exactly what's happening here, and just kind of do the same thing that we did in step 4. Maybe not as thorough, but I'm going to quickly kind of touch it. And then it says we discuss them with someone immediately. So I just did a 4th step. Now I'm going to do my 5th step, which is call my sponsor. I caution folks because sometimes it may be necessary to call somebody else, but I'm a very manipulative person, and I will call people until I get the answer that I'm looking for. So it's hard to call a sponsor, just like the 5th step was difficult. But man, we went over some really heavy stuff in that 5th step. This shouldn't be too hard. Like the guy that cut me off in traffic, that's not a tough conversation. Pick up the phone. And then it says make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone, which is steps 8 and 9. And then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. So I just worked steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 in a matter of 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes at max. And guess what? I have all the promises that it talks about in step 5. I can look the world in the eye. I feel free. I can get twisted up at 9 a.m., get clear with this stuff pretty quickly, and then be free for the rest of the day. Why would I wait till the evening to do this? Or 6 weeks from now when it's just piled up on me?
Right. Do you remember what your first 10th step was?
I know. That was too long ago. So for us, for me, most of the stuff that comes up has to do with my family or people at work or some fear that I've got going on, money, sexual integrity, and how I treat the opposite sex. That's the stuff that comes up. I do have a 10 step that I did a couple days ago, if you want me to talk about
Sure.
that.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So I have been remodeling my house for a couple years now, and my ego says, well, I need to do the work because I'm a man and I need to do that. So the last week, we're like at the very end of the deal, and there's some tile flooring that we have to do. And so I've been doing the flooring myself. And I took off Wednesday and I worked all day. I get home from work and I'm like working on the floor, and it's just like, we don't always get like the attaboys at home like we do in recovery. But so I was kind of like expecting some sort of feedback from my significant other, my wife. So Saturday I worked all day. They left and had a great day. They had fun with the family. I worked all day. I was exhausted. And then Sunday hits and I'm just like done. And my wife walks in and she's like, what do you want to do today? And I said, well, I'd like to spend some time with the kids. She goes, I really think we need to finish this work. We're behind. And it just set me off. I was just not happy about how she was. I said, well, of course we got to justify our own behavior. So I was like, well, I've been working and you guys went yesterday. I'd like to, blah, blah. But this step came to me because it didn't sit right with how I handled the situation, and I needed to get quiet. So I went in a different part of my house and prayed a little bit and called my sponsor. And my sponsor said, you're living in your ego, sir. And you need to hire someone to do this work. Go spend time with your family. Go clean it up with your wife. I was able to kind of see some things from a different angle because I can't see it in the moment. And so I picked up the phone, called him, we talked, and had an amazing day. The rest of the day was awesome. I went and made amends to my wife. And then I just had to be of service to my family. And it was like the coolest day. I texted him that night. I said, we had the best day. But that's the example, because that would have set me off for 3 or 4 days, and then I'm like not talking to my, and then justifying behaviors and holding grudges and all the stuff that we looked at in step 4. It didn't need to be that way. I was able to clean it up, and life was good.
It really sounds like, first and foremost, you have to find these things objectionable. Did that come immediately for you, or did it take some time to find, your behavior, your ego? Did you find that took time to find it objectionable?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not used to looking at this stuff. And also, I was 25 years old, and so what I found objectionable, well, what I didn't find objectionable at 25 is different than now at 42. And so there's going to be, and it says this is a growth step. So we're going to continue to grow. And what we need to understand is that I don't have it all figured out. And I get to allow myself to just live life again, get back into the stream of life. And then I have a program that's going to handle the defects as they come up. I used to try to micromanage everything and make sure this wasn't this or that. But it's like, no, this is what this step is for. I get to go into life, get to go back into life and be a human being. But like you said, that's the biggest thing. I have to find it objectionable. And usually that, for a guy like me, that takes a lot of suffering or pain, and I don't want to do that anymore. And I have learned, just like we did in the 5th step, I have gotten closer to my sponsor through this step. I've gotten closer to God, and I've learned so much about myself. And so it's like I get to just be right where I'm at, and I don't have to be perfect, and I'm not going to be perfect. And my sponsor has been around longer than I have, and he says, he still struggles with the same stuff. And it's so helpful to hear that, because it's like, it's not an overnight deal, and I'm never going to reach graduation like I want to. It's like I'm always growing, and through this process, which is a humbling process, like it talks about in step 5, it's like the humility that's necessary to face this stuff. Is the same humility I need in this step, and this is what I get. And I see too many people, and myself included, where I want to be the 12-step guru and tell everybody else what they need to do, but in reality, I am sober for a long time, but still living a double life, because I'm not checking this stuff in. I'm not really, watching for this stuff, and I'm not growing. And then I get sick, and we can get sick in recovery. So, yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of the 10th step is the destruction of ego, and finding these things objectionable. How does it feel? How do you know if you're holding on to something and you're not 10-stepping about it? How do you know when you need to 10-step something?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for me, as I grew, like it says in understanding and effectiveness, what that means is as I grow spiritually, I start getting a little more sensitive. Spiritually, I call it like a sensitivity that comes when the way I just spoke to my wife. I could just justify that because she wronged me in my head, right? But I can't sit with that anymore. And so there's a feeling where I don't feel free. I don't feel like I'm living, the principles of the program, or I just don't feel like things are good with me in the world. And that's when it's time to pick up the phone. It's like I can't put my finger on it. Maybe there's depression, maybe there's fear, maybe there's something going on, and I just can't, I don't know what it is. But again, if I'm doing this on a daily basis and watching for this stuff, it doesn't have to pile up. But for me, it's a gut feeling. This is, and for me, I used to be terrified to pick up the phone. I used to be terrified when the stuff come up. It's like, what does it mean? And today I'm grateful, because it means I'm a human being and I still need to work this program. I haven't graduated, because that's the scary part, is when you kind of reach this place where you think you've got it all figured out. And the humility and, like you said, the ego deflation is so powerful for me. I look forward to the process. I'm good. Something comes up, it's like, great, go talk about it.
Did you ever feel odd, as a man picking up the phone and calling another man, for him to destroy your ego? Like, was that hard to practice that humility?
That is the toughest part of this step. It's just like step 5. And it's crazy because when we describe this step as like a maintenance, it's not a maintenance. You can't look at it that way. It's a growth step because it means I cannot stay static. Every day I have to grow. So yes, it's extremely difficult. And the person that sponsors me is a 10-step, I call him a Nazi, but I hated doing this. It's not natural to like tell on yourself and point out your weaknesses. I felt like there was something wrong with me if this came up. It's amazing how what I think is reality is not reality. I think that by picking up the phone and calling about this like thing that I've talked about so many times is going to make me somehow flawed or less than or whatever, and he's going to judge me. And it's not the case. And that once you kind of get past that, and again, it's ego trying to stop me from growing. But once I get past that, I realize how much freedom I get from this step. So yeah, that I do think, especially for men, this is a challenging step. It's hard to get into the routine and the habit of doing it. It's hard to understand how necessary it is. And I like to use some of the negative promises in the 5th step. Can I read those?
Absolutely.
Because it's like, okay, it's a Thursday afternoon. Everything was great this week, and then something came up. Like, I don't want to have to call him. But it tells me on page 72, and this is the negative promises of step 5, which I think are applicable to step 10. It says, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Wow, okay. So, yeah, I'm going to pick up the phone. And then he says, having persevered with the rest of the program, which means that I'm going to meetings, I'm sponsoring people, maybe I do my prayer meditation in the morning at night. They wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never, I'm just going to say, continued their house cleaning. It says they took their inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. So am I square with the house on a daily basis? That's what I need to ask myself. Like, am I holding on, like you were talking about, holding on to things? I can't carry this stuff anymore. Then it says they only thought they lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in a sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. And I want to say this because when we do our first round of 5th step, there's some big stuff that comes out, but we're just scratching the surface. And so this idea that once I get to 10, 11, and 12 that I've like arrived or graduated, I like to look at it as, no, I'm just now starting. This is the beginning process. So I was single, 25, young, and so there was a lot of life that had to happen in between from then until now that I wasn't equipped to deal with. And so that's why for me, this step, it's like I'm living life like everybody else does, but I don't have alcohol to run to or all my defects that I typically go to. So for me, it's like, yes, the ego wants you to stay isolated. We have to do this step. We have to.
As you started practicing step 10 and calling your sponsor, did you find any new character defects or new patterns of behavior that were emerging even though you had already had a spiritual awakening? Were there things that were not on your character defect list that then popped up later on?
I will say this. There's things that maybe, because first of all, I don't even really remember. Like, it was a while ago, but some of the stuff was a blur when I did my first inventory. Secondly, I didn't really understand what those words meant fully. Maybe I wrote them down and I could kind of like connect with them. But man, I really do understand selfishness and self-seeking when I'm a boss of a company and I'm dealing with employees and other people. So it's like some of this stuff will come alive as I get some time and I start seeing it for what it really is. Try being a parent.
Yeah.
And all your defects are going to like come out on a daily basis. And so, and it's funny, we have a running joke because I call my sponsor typically every Sunday. And he knows, like, if it's Sunday, because usually I'm with my kids and my family all day long, and so some defect is going to come that I didn't know. So to answer your question, I didn't realize how afraid of life I was. I'm afraid of everything. Fear is like my number one right now, and it's just crazy how much I don't trust God still, and I need to learn and grow and call and do the things that we do. But my sponsor knows that I'm probably going to be calling him on Sundays.
It's interesting to hear you say that after, 17 years, that you have moments where you still don't trust God and you run the show. Is that because you feel like you have to be a provider, that you have to be perfect at everything? Like, is that a character defect in itself coming up, like to 10-step about just this expectation of perfectionism and being this provider?
Right. So finances are really tough for me. That's been the biggest area. And I've had to go through some really hard times to know that God's going to take care. Like, we can go recite the third step stuff, and oh yes, I have a new employer and all that. But that, when it gets real, like when you're responsible for the family's income or whatever that looks like for me. But again, yes, I have to be reminded every day that I'm no longer running the show. That line that it talks about where God is everything or is nothing, that's not a one-time decision for me. Like, oh yeah, by the way, he can handle this or the job and it took for me a lot of suffering, especially around work and trying to I'm a workaholic at times, and lack of balance and all that stuff, to realize that God, and someone said this to me. It was probably like 2 years ago. So you're talking about 15 years of recovery. And she said, have you ever prayed before you went into like a client meeting? Like, no, I never thought of that. Like, do you think that God probably has a say in what goes on? I said, oh, okay. And it's just like, oh yeah, I need to surrender this thing that I think I'm doing, or I'm, and so yes, I mean, there's so much I could talk about, but that's one of the toughest ones is the pressure that I put on myself to somehow. And it's amazing because when I first got sober, I was almost homeless. So it's like, now that I have, it's like, what power do I think I have now? I mean, I have the same power as I did then.
Right.
And everything has worked out up until this point.
What would you say to a man that just maybe got out of first step? He spent 14 days, he feels great, but, his priority is like, I need to get a job. I need to start providing because I feel good. What would you tell them about recovery versus immediately starting to work or being that provider? How did you balance that in the beginning?
I was fortunate enough to be very unemployable at the beginning. So I was so young and immature, and so I didn't have that problem, but I do struggle with that even today. And I would say you got to be really careful. One of the biggest hurdles in recovery is our feelings. So feeling like I've got it, or feeling like I'm doing great now. I got to pump the brakes a little bit. Can I read this real quick?
Absolutely.
So on page 87, it says, "It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels." And my sponsor says this is the number one negative promise in this book. This is like, we need to read this every day. "We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done." Okay, so to answer your question. So reading that, it changes my perspective on things, because now I've had this experience, and now I have to continue to grow in this experience. I can't let work or whatever I think is more important than my recovery get in the way of my spiritual growth. It's contingent that I continue to grow and carry the vision. So it was pointed out to me, if God wants you to not have a job, you're not going to have a job. If he wants you to be homeless, you're going to be homeless and helping other people that are struggling with alcohol. I got other alcoholics. You're going to be sponsoring people. So I think, and the book talks about it a lot, but it's like the person who dives into work and doesn't balance their recovery is way more dangerous than the person who's like gung-ho about recovery and maybe doesn't even get a job. Or both need balance, but the one that's only doing work, you got to be really careful. I have to understand what I've been given here. I've been given a gift. A miracle has happened in my life. I could not stay sober. I couldn't even get a job. People didn't even want to see me. And now I graduated college, and I was, at the time, like, all these great things are happening. But this is, again, daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I've sponsored a lot of people, and this is the one thing that takes them out, is they think they've got it all. Okay, now I'm good. Now I can go take the bull by the horns, and I'm going to go get a job, and that's all I'm going to care about. And then they call me, 6 months later because they relapsed or whatever. And so we got to talk about that. We got to be careful.
Yeah. How do you feel if you haven't 10-stepped in a while? Like, do you notice that you haven't 10-stepped in a while?
Yes. So if I'm doing my nightly the way I'm supposed to, which I do every night, and this is from someone who used to not do any of this stuff. So, but it's a discipline of mine, and if I'm catching stuff that's been coming up regularly, okay, I'm not watching, right? I'm maybe getting on cruise control and kind of going through the day, or I'm justifying behavior, which is more dangerous for me. I cannot, justify some of the behaviors that I do. So if I look at this, though, every day is a day I must carry the vision of God's will and into all my activities. At the end of the day, am I really doing that? And if I can't say that I have been the last 4 or 5 days, there's probably something that I should probably pick up the phone and talk to my sponsor about, and then maybe catch this stuff a little sooner next time. But we're all. I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm really not. Ask my sponsor. So it's like, we're growing in this thing.
Yeah, it's progress, not perfection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As a sponsor, so we've talked a lot about Step 10 as a sponsee, but as a sponsor, when you have guys calling to 10-step with you, like, I remember the first time somebody called me to 10-step, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? How am I going to identify their part in it and what their character defects are? Because I feel like anytime I've 10-stepped with a sponsor, it's like they immediately can call me out. Right. Did that take practice as a sponsor to be able to listen to someone's 10-step or come up with ideas of how they need to help someone, or did that kind of come naturally to you?
It did not come naturally. For someone who, so again, it's a good question, because if you don't 10-step, how can you expect your sponsees to 10-step and you even know what to do? So I think what was helpful for me is I started doing it regularly, and then kind of hearing how my sponsor reacts to me or helps me see things, helps me look at some things when it comes up for other guys that I sponsor. The other part of that is we got to be careful. As a sponsor, I'm not a therapist. I'm not, trying. Like, we like you said, we're just trying to recognize the ego. The ego is what needs to be exposed here. And so whether that's fear, and there may be some applicable things that, like, practical things that need to be applied. Like, we need to maybe look for a job and let me help share my experience around that, or whatever's going on, or relationship stuff. But I just think it just takes time to learn and to grow and know when things come up. The other thing for me was, when you are the person who worked the 5th step with this sponsee, this person, you get to know them at a deep level. And my sponsor knows the darkest secrets of my past and present. Mm-hmm. And so he knows what makes me tick and what I get twisted up about. And so it's a lot easier when you get to know each other. And that's the part that people rob the sponsor of, is like, when you don't call, like, you don't get to, like, that person has an experience every time you call. Like, I have like, my sponsee called yesterday, and it was like, I needed that. It was like perfect timing.
Right.
I was struggling. It was like, yeah, I needed to hear that. And I needed to tell him something, but I needed to hear what I told him. That was actually for me. So
yeah. I know I've always heard people say, like, oh, make sure you call your sponsor. Like, it helps them more than it helps you. And in the beginning, I was like, well, they're helping me so much. Like, there's no, how does that help?
Right.
And it really does, because it takes us out of self. And then sometimes, like, I had a sponsee recently who was dealing with something with one of her sponsees, and I was dealing with that with another sponsee. Right. And so by me walking her through it gave me the answer for my sponsee, my other sponsee. And it was such a weird, like, was it odd or was it God?
Exactly.
Has there ever been either a 10-step of yours or a sponsee's that, like, was actually justified, that you're like, oh, you don't really need to 10-step that?
It happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, not quite a bit, but it happens. Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I can get pretty, I tend to get a little bit, not codependent, but like almost legalistic about the 10-step. Oh, I got to call about every emotion that comes up, and that's not necessarily the case. Or a sponsor will say, yeah, this is what you need. You actually did the right thing, like pat yourself on the back. Like, this is what it looks like. It was uncomfortable, but it's what it looks like. And yeah, there's times guys want to call and just check in, and I didn't read those instructions in the big book. But that's cool. We can do that, but let's do it while we're helping other alcoholics. Let's not do this in the middle of the day to just shoot the breeze. So yeah, I think that definitely that could come up.
What would you want somebody who is listening to this, who has never experienced the steps, maybe doesn't know that there's a solution, or is unsure if they're an alcoholic, like, what would you say to someone listening to this who is curious about either recovery or alcoholism?
Well, there's a lot of resources out there that you can look into, and Maggie's does a great job. We have a lot of podcasts, and there are a lot of people that carry the message here, and I just think there are places you can go for help if you're questioning it. Definitely, maybe try out a meeting. Go ask somebody who has had some experience. My number's always out there. I'm willing to help. I love talking recovery. My wife loves talking recovery. And yeah, I would just say ask. Don't suffer like I did in silence, and not ask questions or seek. Because the truth is, there are some people who, again, there's a difference between I need some good therapy and maybe need to change my life, and the person who's a real alcoholic and needs a program. And so let's get you with somebody that like myself or Laura, or somebody that can really break down the disease of alcoholism. And I think we have the resources here on Maggie's. I mean, it's all over the podcast, the internet. So, but yeah, definitely reach out, and if you ever need or questioning, or if you're suffering, you don't have to do this alone. And shame is going to kill us. I mean, shame is the one thing that kept me sick for a long, long time. So.
What would you tell someone listening to this about the Magdalen House and the men's community?
Well, I've been trying to press you guys to do the men's house for years, so I am so grateful. My experience with the Magdalen House is this. I go to 12-step meetings with many women that were absolutely hopeless. Like, we'd see them come in and out, and they came here, they went through the program, they did Next Step, and they are like fixtures in our group. They are on fire. And I was just looking around, and I'm talking to Lisa. I'm like, we need to do this for the men. Like, there's some strong women here. And finally, by the grace of God, and I think the men's program is phenomenal. I get to carry the message there, and they help me more than I help them probably. I just leave there on fire. But to the men that are suffering, like, this is the place to be. You're going to get an education on what real alcoholism is, and the program of action to get us to the solution pretty quickly. Like, we're not here, Maggie's is not here to like sell you on anything or drag you along with the process. We want to get you the solution as quick as possible so that you can get back to life and live a truly fulfilled life, is what I see people that have come through here. Just a new life. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Mayan, thank you so much for everything that you do for the Magdalen House, and thank you for being here. I cannot wait for this episode to come out. I feel like I say that every episode, but this is going to be a really good one. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This has been RecoverED, hosted by Laura Wilson and brought to you by the Magdalen House. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.